All right, I'm gonna break tradition, and I'm gonna get to my rant straight away because usually I start the lectures showing you the advertisement posters for the films, which is a good way of introducing to us the film and how the film wants to be read. Blah blah blah. But I'm fired up about this poster. I'm talking about the poster on our right. That's Chris O'Dowd, the great Chris O'Dowd. And he is front and centre of the poster. The Sapphires are in the background. And they've got this kind of blue tinge tint thing going on to them. What would the film be about? Well, it'll be about Chris O'Dowd being some sort of singer in a suit. That is not true, ladies and gentlemen. The film is not about Chris O'Dowd in a suit. The film is about the Sapphires. It's about Deborah Mailman, Jessica Mulboy. It's about the Sapphires being fantastic. Going to America and just killing it. I'm not so going to America, going to Vietnam and killing it in the Vietnam War with a lot of American soldiers around them, salivating the greatness that is the Sapphires. Now, what you're looking at in the controversial poster, which is the American release poster, was whitewashing. No better example is that. Where the Sapphires, the star of the film, were pushing the background, Chris O'Dowd was pushing the foreground, and the Sapphires were literally whitewashed with a blue tinge. Disgraceful. What did Chris O'Dowd say? He called it ridiculous. It's misleading, he said on Twitter. It's ill-judged, it's insensitive, and everything the film wasn't. True, true, true. Thank you, Chris O'Dowd, the voice of reason. And, it's crazy. What do you think of the poster? And in Australia, we didn't stoop to such lows in the poster. Now, the Sapphires, the actual Sapphires, right? Not Moorboy and her gang. Is it Moorboy or Malbell? I don't really know. How do you pronounce Malboy? Is it Mal? I think it's Malboy. Moorboy, Malboy. I think it's Malboy. Okay, anyway. The real Sapphires said it's disrespectful to women of colour everywhere who have stood up against this sort of thing all their lives. The film is about standing up against this bullshit. The film, the very essence of the film is actually saying we're going to make the Sapphires the star of the movie, because they haven't never been the star of their own history. They've always been in the background of other people's history. And then the very poster that is promoting the film does exactly what the film is working against. It's a disgrace! I'm disappointed in America right now. And everybody in America, hang your head to the ground and just have a think about what's going on in your country and why you would stoop to such disgraceful lows as that. Now, that would be one response, but Carl Quinn of the Sydney Morning Herald, you know what he said about the poster? Smart marketing. That's what he said. He's quite smart marketing, the best way to get the Sapphires in front of as many pairs of American eyes as possible. What do you think about that, ladies and gentlemen? Do you agree with Carl from the Sydney Morning Herald? Carl, you're digging a hole. Keep on digging. Keep on digging. Who's with Carl? Now, Bitch Media. I didn't even know there was a Bitch Media, but apparently there is a Bitch Media. And they said, there comes a time when smart marketing taints the nuance of the product that it seeks to promote. Thank you, Bitch Media. Take a bow, Bitch Media. Newman from Bitch Media said that. Exactly. Carl, hang your head in shame with the Americans. And Newman from Bitch Media is absolutely on the money as far as I'm concerned. Now, of course, you can agree with Carl because, you know, the film did all right in America. But really, there comes a time. There comes a time when it's about integrity, right? Am I right here? It's not just about getting the film in front of as many people's eyes as possible. I mean, this course, we're often looking at marketing and thinking about the way that a film, the way it's marketed, actually is not correct to the film that it is. Muriel's Wedding being a perfect example. The cover of that, it's a wedding, it's great, everyone's happy, you got sing-along, you got dance, you got ABBA. That film is fucking dark, man. It's messed up. And the poster should be promoting its messed upness. And the Sapphires, which is clearly a film about the Sapphires. Now, Chris O'Dowd's in the film. Like, you know, he's an important player in the film. Don't get me wrong. But making him front and center and then kind of bluing them out or whatever it does, you know, with that tint, you know, I find crazy. And I look forward to ranting about this in the classroom. Now, Ben Goldsmith, he, he's talking about, so in this lecture, I want to talk a bit about the internationalness of Australian cinema. It's certainly internationalness of the Sapphires, because that's how the film needs to be understood. Now, there are some issues with the film itself, because, you know, the film kind of claims that the Sapphires started this sort of Supremes-esque group, which is true. But, you know, there are a number of, of groups at the time kind of doing similar things, where the film kind of claims that this was, an anomaly in this, which it really was. Anyway, Ben Goldsmith, the outward-looking Australian International Project asks, what is atypical or shared? And questions the function of cinema in articulating universal themes or common human values and concerns and fostering the sense of connection to people and places beyond them. Okay, so it's not what's different to the international, it's what's atypical or shared, right? So the point is that in a film like The Sapphires is actually taking like universal music in the Supremes and getting these singers, these Indigenous singers, to perform these songs. And it feels, in a sense, like it's another, it's another film about the supreme kind of influence. But Ben Goldsmith is saying that the problem in the past has been Australians actually dismissing a film like The Sapphires, saying, well, it's try-hard American, because it actually leaves Australia for Vietnam. But he's saying it's what's atypical or shared with international cinemas that makes Australia, because then you can start to understand what this film is doing that those films aren't, and what this film is doing what those films are, because we are part of the international. So it's not just, say, Nicole Kidman making a film in Australia and going to America and then coming back to Australia. It's actually the Australian films themselves setting themselves up for international markets and demographics and things like that. All right. Now, Ben Goldsmith, he says, productions that have cultural resonance, again, that word, resonance, we love that word. Productions that have cultural resonance, even if they do not fit official categories of Australianness. And in the past, a film like The Sapphires would not be considered Australian. Ridiculous, I know. Because they don't fit. It's not like it's a film in Australia about Australians. It's actually a film in Australia and also outside Australia. It's got Chris O'Dowd, who's clearly Irish, very Irish. And think of The Sapphires as a musical, and the way that the musical genre is used to transcend different genres and categories and things like that as well. I have a word for you. Supranational. It's a real word. I looked it up and everything. Tomo Regan and Ann Potter They use the word. Now, the meaning of the word is having power or influence that transcends national boundaries or governments. And the Sapphires. How does the Sapphires speak to that quote, ladies and gentlemen? Tommy Regan and Ann Potter go on to say, alongside Bourne international production, the so-called Your Runaway production, we need to include the transformations within the national production space in terms of formats, processes, structural connections, production companies, and TV network operations. These are likewise, and I've put this in bold, not evidently global because they are happening at a national scale and do not need to be run through international agreement. So the point is, often when we think of the international films, we think of Mad Max Fury Road, we think of the big things, which is clearly international. They're all about the international. Where what he's saying is every local film is playing with international ideas and tropes and things like that, and we need to understand that, and we need to appreciate that more than we actually are. And the problem is with a film like Sapphires, like with Ballabo, these films which are kind of, the story is outside of Australia, are often not seriously considered. And he's saying, he and she, with Tom and Anne, they're saying, take things more seriously. Wonder what they would have to say about the poster if they're taking that seriously, or as seriously as I am. Now, they go on. So, globalization is in local production and international production alike. It is happening from within and from without. It is across high budget and low budget programs and films, and it is in both quality and demonic entertainment. So basically what they're saying is there's no such thing as here is an international Australian film and here is a national Australian film. Every film is national and every film is international. And if you're not appreciating that, you're actually not appreciating all the interesting things that the industry is doing. So appreciate it. Get with the program. Appreciate more. And there you have a cute dog and a penguin in a film that I currently can't remember the title, because obviously that poster isn't in English. It's, I forget the name. Anyway, email me the name. No, don't email me the name. Just tell me when you see me. Cross-cultural crossover filmmaking. An emerging form of cinema that crosses cultural borders at the stage of conceptualization and production, and hence manifests a hybrid cinematic grammar at the textual level, as well as crossing over in terms of its distribution and reception. Cross-cultural crossover filmmaking. So, okay, what are we talking about here? An emerging form of cinema that crosses cultural boundaries. Right. So, the Sapphires is all about crossing boundaries. But as I will read you soon, the quote, the film it's so Australian and it's so indigenous in actually what it's doing with the production personnel and things like this. So we need to think of the film in regard to that. All right, now, Therese Davis, so her article is, that's your article for the week. That's your reading. That's the, they're the pages to take to bed. If you read in bed, if you don't read in bed, then I wouldn't suggest that you take the pages to bed. Take the pages wherever you're most comfortable reading, is what I would say to you. Okay. Therese Davis says, transnational studies of Australian film have tended to focus on large-scale, mainstream, international production arrangements and economic benefits to the nation, with little attention paid to textual or social issues such as on-screen cultural representation. So what is she banging on about? She's banging on about the Baz problem, the George Miller problem. You make Happy Feet, you make Fury Road, you make, Baz Luhrmann films. Australia, The Great Gatsby, right? Now, they're like your big international arrangements and economic benefits to the nation because we're doing these big, Hollywood films in Australia. And what she's saying is the ones that are actually like representing Australia on the screen, they're actually not being appreciated as international films, international Australian films. So think about that. What she's saying is, how is the international represented in national films? Denationalisation. Well, what's that all about? Let's talk about that. Tom and Anne are back, and they're saying different national element, whether production companies, local format production, and policy settings that are still identified as localised in national settings are now substantially orientated towards global agendas and systems. This is leading to a subtle process of denationalisation. So what they're saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that all of this international obsession that Australian film industry currently has, right? International, what we're essentially doing is we're denationalising ourselves. So soon you'll watch an Australian film or you'll watch an Australian show and it'll be like, I'm in this global kind of world here. And I'm not watching something that's so specifically Australian. And they're saying, alarm bells, ladies and gentlemen. We need to do something about this. This is not good. This is not good. Soon, we're going to have like no specific Australian culture on the screen. And that's bad. That's very bad. As a person who does like historical research, if you want to know about Australia in 1969, watch a film from there. Gives you a sense of the time. And they're saying, turn on the alarm bells. Often when we think of globalization and crossover, it's discussed through a denationalisation. But the Sapphires brings the international musical genre into the national. You see, this is why the film is so groovy. And yes, I use the term groovy. Because it's like, here's a national film. Here's a small national film. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it as a musical. Terrific stuff. I think that's just great. Now the ending. I won't ruin the ending. Okay. Now, Adrian Martin is a writer. And he said, the film turns its back on globalized show business. Globalized show business. Does it, Dr. Martin? Does it really turn its back on globalized show business? Now, I would say it doesn't turn its back on globalization. It does it on its own terms. It doesn't become the Hollywood fairy tale. It becomes its own thing. And how is this ending like so many other endings in Australian films? And what's going on with that? And have a think about that when you're watching the film and the ending. Think about how historically, Australian film endings, it's not a good place to be. You don't want to be in an Australian film ending because it often doesn't work out that well. And, that's all I'm saying. But this film doesn't sell itself out to become this happy ending, but at the same time, it finds some sort of satisfaction, I would say. It'll be interesting how you respond to the ending. Now, this is the director. And he said, this is a film that's co-written by an Indigenous person. The cinematographer is Indigenous. Well, you know who the cinematographer is? Warwick Thornton, who did Samson and Delilah. and Sweet Country, the terrific Warwick Thornton. And can I say, Warwick, if you're watching, you did a great job with this film. It looks beautifully, beautifully shot. The director's Indigenous. The choreographer's Indigenous. So the chefs around the broth are a little bit more involved, And that's Wayne Blair. And he is, you may think, Steve, you're an idiot. That's not the director, that's an actor. And he's in a whole bunch of stuff. Well, I'm sorry, but he did direct this film. And he did a good job directing this film. Wayne Blair, get back behind the camera and do more. Because we're liking you behind the camera, which is no dig at your ability in front of the camera. We're just saying, well done for the Sapphires. Now, this is the point. It's not like an international film where we're like, oh, we're going to get all these international people to come and work on the film and that will make it international because that's what we do. Now, what they're actually doing is saying we're going to make it really, really local and really, really indigenous just through the personnel involved in the film, but through the musical genre, through the story that they're telling, through the international influence of the story. That's where the international connections is going to be. Terrific idea. And that's why the film works so well, I would say. Just some conclusions. Ben Goldsmith. And, please go back to Ben's article from week 1 or 2. My intention has been to encourage scholars of Australian cinema, that's us, to consider the diversity of relations that constitute it, and not to be limited to understanding of Australian cinema that simply conform with categories developed by government agencies for their own purposes. We've got to break away from the government agencies. Why are we defining Australian cinema through Screen Australia and how they want to fund things? Good on you, Ben Goldsmith. He's saying a film like The Matrix, called in Australia. It was shot in Australia. It was using Australians on the film. Australians in the film. Why can't we call that Australian? It might actually open up how we think of the national cinema. Another quote, rather than understanding Australian cinema as a territory, Australian international cinema is conceived as a space of relations. What does that mean, a space of relations? The Sapphires is about a space of relations. Final thought, it's a musical. A wonderful musical. How do you define Oz musical? Do you watch Australian musicals? There aren't heaps, but there's enough. Brand New Day would be another musical. Would you pay to see an Oz musical? Well, of course. When I said that, I mean Baz Luhrmann, Moulin Rouge. Come on. How does the film operate within discourse? Is how it like the other films, and how are the stolen generation aspects dealt with, which I haven't really discussed in this lecture because it's been so packed with other stuff. But it's actually a really interesting film about stolen generation, whitewashing, shame, guilt, all these really interesting stuff going on. I mean, it's historically significant. It's historically placed. It's actually based on, a real people who were still alive and are saying to Americans, boycott this film because of that disgraceful poster. I look forward to discussing the poster and so many other things about this film, The Sapphires. Now, if you're the sort of person that thinks, no, sorry, Steve, I'm not doing The Sapphires. I don't care for The Sapphires. Think again, right? Because The Sapphires is really terrific, top-notch stuff. It's really well-paced. It's funny. It's poignant. The musical performances are great. It's just really, really good. And it's fun. And it's fun. It's fun. So, on that note, I'm going to leave it there. And I look forward to watching this film with you in a glorious Blu-ray copy that I have to screen for you. And we can talk so many other things as well as maybe singing a song or two after the film, because I know that's really what you're all wanting to do after this film. Because if your legs aren't dancing a little when you're watching this film and your booty isn't shaking just a tad, well, it's not the film for you, obviously, but it's also maybe you should be looking at really your pulse and whether that's working properly, because this is a film that's terrific in performance and the whole performative nature of this film. All right, on that note, I'm going to leave it there and I'm going to say bye for now.